in England. I am on vacation, or holiday as we call it in the British Isles. And you can tell that I'm on vacation because I'm in a car surrounded by cameras, wearing nice clothes, recording a video. That's definitely how holidays go, at least that's what Nikki tells me. And I'm here seeing my family, but when I do that, one of the things that I do when I'm here in the UK is rent a vehicle that you cannot get in the US, well, at least when I have the chance. And this is the MG4. It's actually a vehicle I've been really looking forward to driving. One has to talk about the fact that these vehicles are not available in the US, because one of the comments we always get is, oh my god, they're so unsafe. Well, they meet European crash standards, which are in some ways more strict and in some ways less strict than the US crash standards. It's definitely better for pedestrian safety. If I recall correctly, there are differences in the way that the European and the US crash standards handle rollover risk, but this being an actual compact C-segment vehicle and not an SUV, does not have little stickers to tell you it's got a rollover risk, partly because it's being sold in Europe, but partly also because it's an actual car. So it actually has much lower rollover risk than a lot of other vehicles that you get on the market. So here I am on the motorway. It is a fine vehicle on the motorway, apart from the fact that I loathe and despise and absolutely hate its lane centering and its whole driver assistance package. I fundamentally don't use any of it. But how is it as a vehicle? Okay, so before we get into the review proper, I think it's really important for us to just clarify a couple of things. This is not a vehicle that has been lent to us by MG. This is not the current version of the vehicle. This is the 2023 MG4. In fact, I think it's actually a fairly early one. And one of the things that means is it doesn't benefit from the latest round of updates, which have improved the vehicle. So we are looking at how the vehicle stood in 2023, and that also means that you get to see how a vehicle like this has stood up to the wear and tear of being a rental vehicle. Now, the first thing to say is that when you get into this vehicle, which is, shall we say, price competitive, it doesn't feel like a cheap car. The parts all fit together well. There's no weird squeaks and rattles. I've been driving it up and down country lanes in Cornwall, which are not smooth. And I haven't noticed anything untoward. I haven't noticed any shakes, any little pinging plastic noises. The other thing is, unlike the MG ZS that we had a couple of years ago, I haven't found broken trim clips. I haven't found things that have disintegrated. That is a real leap forward for the quality of the vehicle. It doesn't feel like a vehicle that's going to fall apart, which that is really nice. At this price point, I really expected there to be some minor cosmetic issues in the car, and apart from some scrapes on the door where people's feet have rubbed, it feels basically like a new car. And it does only have, to be fair, 12,000 miles on it, which even for a rental car, that's not huge. The other thing is that the displays are all nice and clear. To be honest, the displays are vastly better than in my 2019 Kia Niro EV. They are clear, they are bright, they are sharp, which is, in fact, an improvement over, say, the Toyota RAV4 plug-in hybrid that we had, where the displays were kind of fuzzy and not great. So they've clearly worked very hard to make this interior feel good. And that work has clearly extended to stuff like the switch gear around the steering wheel. So the indicators, the wiper controls, the headlamp controls, all of those feel very pleasant. It does definitely fall down a bit on the buttons on this center console. They do feel kind of tacky and cheap. And I have to say, there's some weirdness that I've had with this center head unit that I'll talk about when we talk about that. But for example, when I pulled over to put all the camera gear on the vehicle, I pressed the hazard warning light button and it took 3 goes before it actually registered and started doing hazard warning lights, which is, I would say, less than ideal, and that goes with some of the other issues we'll talk about later. But for sure, the steering wheel, which has a sort of octagon MG logo-esque shape, it definitely doesn't feel unpleasant or cheap. It has some very nice, neat stitching on it, and it has, of course, the requisite little center marker so that when you're rallying in your car, you know where the center is. The plastic on the doors, however, is definitely somewhat cheaper. It feels less pleasant to the touch, but the touch surfaces, again, have been made with much nicer materials. It's either leather or vegan leather, by which I mean vinyl. The center of the back seat is similarly covered in a plasticky vinyl material, which my wife informed me when we had 5 people in the car and she was occupying the center back seat. It wasn't ideal. It felt kind of, it wasn't very breathable, shall we say. But I have to say, the controls we use for driving, the gear selector here in the middle, parking brake, and obviously the indicator and windscreen wipers, they all are well placed and comfortable to use. Similarly, the pedals on the floor, the pedal box area, and this is obviously a right-hand drive vehicle. I don't know how it is in a left-hand drive vehicle, but there's plenty of room here. There's a nice footrest for my left foot, and it is a very comfortable vehicle to sit in. The seat has electric adjustments, which you kind of expect even at this price point, and it does forwards, back, and angle and brake of the back, but there's no control, at least on this one, for lumbar support, which is a little bit of a shame, but hey, what are you going to say when your car is at this price? So then we come to how is it to drive, and in general, it's really very good. Driving it on rough surfaces, particularly, like I say, through Cornish roads, I haven't found it getting unsettled particularly, except on particularly rough roads. It handles in a very predictable manner, and it keeps itself pointing in the direction that you ask it to go, which is really the most important thing. However, that beeping is something that we will talk about in the near future, because that is the driver assistance system, and is the worst driver assistance system I've encountered. So it has room in the trunk for 2 checked bag-sized suitcases. I know, because we've done that, and a couple of other small bags kind of crammed in around them. So some people might consider it a subcompact. I would call it a compact. It definitely, I would like to see a little more efficiency out of it. I know MG have said they've worked to improve the efficiency in the latest version of the vehicle, so maybe people are seeing a little bit more. But in this version, in this car, I have seen 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. In the miles that I've driven it, which is probably under 1,000, but certainly several hundred. And I've been driving it over many days, mostly shortish distances around Cornish back roads, but also a big long chunk of motorway from London, and then a big long chunk of motorway back from Cornwall. But really, I think the thing that is most interesting about this vehicle is how competent it feels on the road. MG is an old mark. It has been building cars for a very long time, but SAIC, who bought the name, who bought the rights to use the MG badge, have been building cars for the European market not for a huge amount of time. And while the MG ZS felt competent, it was fairly uninspiring. This vehicle, actually, it doesn't beg you to go faster. It doesn't make you think, oh, I really must drive a little more enthusiastically. But what it does do is make you comfortable. It makes you feel reasonably secure in its abilities. I don't feel like this is a vehicle that would suddenly let me down, or that, as I round a corner and find a car stopped, would make me feel like it's unsafe. While it isn't a vehicle that I've found exciting to be behind the wheel of, and to be fair, MG do now do a performance version of this vehicle and a longer range version than even this one, it definitely gives me no concerns about its ability to go where I point it. I'm probably not going to push it into corners and try and get the rear end to, step out a little bit. But driving around country lanes, driving it down the freeway, I've had absolutely no complaints. Except And this is the big problem that I have had with this vehicle. The driver assistance package is awful. I won't say that it's awful on the motorway, on the freeway. It's, I don't like it, and actually I ended up turning off the lane keep assist because I find it too jerky and it feels like it's trying to pull the car in directions that I really don't want it to go a lot of the time. But when I was on the country lanes, when I was on single track roads, things like that, it became actively dangerous. It would try and pull me. It tried to pull me into a tractor coming the other way. It tried to pull me across the road towards the center of a single lane road at a point where there was a corner and there was a car coming the other way. And it did it multiple times. And the reason I didn't turn it off initially is because it's actually an enormous pain to turn off. So the head unit, which I said I would talk about, and I'm going to talk about it, and I'll try and keep this at least reasonably brief, is not great to use. The climate controls require multiple taps on the screen to get there. This is the first vehicle I've had where I've had to keep changing the temperature, even though the temperature outside hasn't changed, because I can't find one where it's actually providing heat when it gets cold. Well, I can, but it's like 25, 26 degrees C, and you'll have to put the conversion on screen there, Kate. That's what 25, 26 degrees C is in Fahrenheit. Which I don't normally have my car set to that, but it wasn't producing any heat otherwise. And then suddenly you'd find that it would get very, very hot, and you'd have to turn it down to like 22, which also, when it's sunny, I've never had a car that's been sat at 22. They're normally sat at like 17 or 80. So I don't quite know what's going on with that, but it's also multiple presses and I have to look at the screen to do it. There's no climate control button for me to press. And similarly with the driver assistance package, if you want to turn it off, it's multiple presses through the menu. It isn't a persistent change. So once I turned it off, I'd turn off the car, get back in, and it would turn it back on again, which is really quite annoying. I'd rather it just alerted you when you turned on the car and said, hey, driver assistance package is turned off, would you like to turn it back on? And I also found that when I went through the menu on the car, sometimes it would just not have the option to turn it off. Like that option wouldn't be in the list of functions you could turn off. And it seemed to depend initially on whether cruise control was active, but actually sometimes even with cruise control disabled, that lane keep option would disappear. It also consistently gets speed limits very wrong, which is hilarious when you're driving down a motorway and it's shouting at you that you should be doing 30 when it's a 70 limit. So overall, that driver assistance package I found very concerning. The other thing that happened, which I have no explanation for, we were in some slow-moving traffic, inching forwards, coming to a stop, and the car suddenly, like the car ahead of us moved away, I started accelerating, the car was accelerating gently towards it, and then the car stamped on the brakes. And I know it wasn't me because I just looked at my foot and I was like, no, my foot is still on the accelerator. Nearly caused the car behind us to run into us. There was no alert, no warning on the screen, so I don't think it was the automatic braking system because I have tested that. It does work, it works well, and it does put up an alert on the screen. I don't know what happened. The car just came to a stop, and then I had to restart, just take my foot off the accelerator, put it back down, and the car started moving again. I don't know why that happened. If you've got an MG4 and that's happened to you, can you let us know in the Discord chat room? Or if you're a patron, you can let us know on the Patreon channel, because I don't know if that's just this vehicle and something weird happened, or if it's a more widespread issue. So I think one of the other things we should talk about is like the array of other features that it gets that you would expect on higher price vehicles that do actually work pretty well, even despite this being a lower cost vehicle. This vehicle has proper rapid charging. it charges consistently at over 100 kilowatts through most of the battery's capacity. Essentially every time I've charged it at a rapid charger, I've seen 100 plus kilowatts, 120, 130, 140, and that rate has been maintained for a long period. As you'd expect, the car does have both adaptive and multi-level regenerative braking, or regeneration. I'm not sure I'd really call it regenerative braking because it is pretty light. It only manages around 25% recuperation before it cuts off, and I'd really like to see one pedal being an option and a more enthusiastic, more aggressive regeneration option available. I've had to use the friction brakes a fair amount while I've been driving. When you press on the pedal for the brakes, you don't get blended braking. I mean, you get blended because it's already doing the regeneration, but putting your foot hard on the brake doesn't mean that you get maximum regen. It just means you're already at the kind of gentle 25%, and then you start using the friction brakes, which is disappointing. So obviously you have all electric windows. On one occasion, pressed the down button, nothing happened. Pressed again, nothing happened. Pressed it a third time and it worked. So sometimes things seem to be a little bit iffy. In this iteration of the vehicle, there is no rear wiper, which I find rather disappointing. But I'm told that the next version of the vehicle, the 2024, does have a rear wiper. I haven't seen one. MG are not actually very helpful with their press releases, so it's kind of hard for me to tell, but the information that I've seen suggests that it does have a rear wiper. The car has a top-down view, which it provides when you're parking, which is very good. It has rear parking sensors. Those worked very well. And it has obviously got a heated steering wheel. The heated steering wheel does work just fine. It's not hugely hot. It's a single stage one, so you have one temperature and that's it. Of course, the steering wheel does have rather too much piano black for my taste. The buttons tend to get marked and dirty with fingerprints, and the little jog control is not my favorite device, but again, think of the price. It has a 3-stage heated front seats, which are pretty good. They're nice and warm. However, I am one of those people who likes my butt hot and to stay warm, and it does turn the temperature down relatively quickly, quicker than I would like. And again, that involves accessing that climate control menu, which is several button presses away. Now, you could, in theory, set the climate control to be on one of these favorite buttons on the steering wheel, which I would probably do if I owned this vehicle. I haven't done that, but it certainly would make using the climate control much easier. You can, of course, summon the assistant, MG. Hey, MG.
I'm here.
Please turn the climate control off.
Climate control is off.
There you go. Actually, I have found that using the MG assistant, sorry, just waiting to see if it came on, because sometimes it does if you just say the brand of the car, then that is a much more reasonable way to access the climate control. I find that much better than going through all the bother of trying to find the button. You have to press, I'm in navigation, so I have to press home, and then I have to swipe, and then I have to press AC, and then I have to press AC because you have to tap it just right. And then there's this array of buttons on the screen, and it's like, this is a little bit intense, and there's only tiny little areas to hit for the temperature. And as you can see, I've got it set for 23, which is way warmer than I normally would, but otherwise the car is absolutely freezing. So there you go. It also has a wireless charging pad. I put my phone on it, and weirdly, like, sometimes it charges and sometimes it doesn't, and I don't quite know why. Sometimes it perks up and goes, yes, I'm charging, and sometimes nothing happens at all. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. And up front, under this flying control unit here, is a USB-A and a USB-C socket. That allows you to connect your phone to CarPlay or Android Auto. I couldn't find and could see no reference to a wireless Android Auto or CarPlay. So we're again in that same situation that Kia had for a long time, where you have the capability to wirelessly charge your phone, but you have to plug it in if you actually want to use CarPlay or Android Auto, which I generally do because, to be fair, the navigation in this car is adequate but not great. So it has, in my experience, tried to direct me down a road which is now closed to vehicles. It is a road which is just for cyclists, which is somewhat of a problem. It's also open to taxis, so if I was a taxi driver that would have been fine, but I'm not. And otherwise, I find that the head unit is pretty quick and responsive. The button presses are registered quickly if you hit the place that it wants you to hit. It's much better than the one that I experienced in that MG ZS that we had last time. And it is certainly comparable to a lot of the other vehicles on the market at this point. It doesn't have anything which makes you think this is a much cheaper vehicle. It doesn't have the kind of lag and delay that you get often with lower segment vehicles. Again, this is a vehicle which is surprising in the way that it is competent and seems relatively well put together. Like, there are definitely places where you can feel that this is built to a price. In terms of styling, I think the MG4 is really a very pretty car. It's not amazingly beautiful, but stylistically, it definitely falls into the I don't mind it. There's some fun accent lighting at the rear, and up front it does have LED headlamps. However, when I was driving using the headlamps, I did notice a weird black, not illuminated strip horizontally across the lights. Again, I don't know if that's just this car, or whether that's a design flaw with the way the light is reflected, but it wasn't ideal. The visibility with the headlamps on wasn't as good as maybe it should be. So at the end of the day, what do I make of the MG4? It's really a very challenging thing to talk about, because as a general purpose, like drive it vehicle, it's really good. It's definitely a vehicle that we should have the possibility to choose in the US, just like the ID3 was last year. I think we as a market are really missing out by not having these kinds of smaller, more affordable EVs. But its safety features, yeah, I am not a fan of its lane keeping. I'm really not a fan of the way that it implements that, with the fact that it tried to steer me into traffic and into other vehicles multiple times. It's the only car where I've consistently had to turn it off before I drive. I found that really annoying. But yeah, if we could get these kind of vehicles in the US, it would be really great. I think that's something that this is kind of my tagline now, you need to talk to your legislators about it, because if you want to see these cars here, that's the only way it's going to happen. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can be 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There's a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Ockle Ward, John Le Pouvoir, World's Tallest Hobbit, John Hendricks, John Franks, Bill LaSalle, Bill Warren, Brian Curry, Amory Wong, Chris Foon, Stephen Tidy, Christian H, Mike Cooper, Casey Chapin, James Carter, Sam Yates, Kai Preshaw, Michael Ball, John Dunlop, Christian Rasmussen, Mark Bullock, Karen and Jude, Mike Whirl, and Daniel. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. Address is also down below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below too. This month we're talking about accessibility in our latest t-shirt design, and keep your eyes peeled for a new special t-shirt just for our trip to Everything Electric in Canada next month. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you've subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we think this one is also well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!